So we're out in the hills where I grew up, in the Cairngorm National Park, and it's an interesting time of the year. The heather is bright purple now in mid-August, and there's all sorts of little beautiful plants to look at, and edibles, medicinals, practical uses, and that's exactly what we're going to be doing today. I'm going to show you some of the things that are in my back garden which I love to use and forage for at this time of the year. So foraging isn't just about looking down at your feet at all the plants, it could also be looking up, it could be looking underneath the ground. Looking up the wise, you could be looking at fruits or nuts or even mushrooms, fungi. This is one which grows on birch trees, and we have quite a lot of this in the Cairngorms. It's called chaga, and chaga grows as a bulge out the tree, and underneath this black outside coating is actually a bright orange corky layer, and that's fantastic for lighting fires, starting fires. It can catch even the dullest of sparks, and that's what we'll do later on to light the fire to cook up some fish and some wild plants. So here we have a whole hillside which is covered in juniper, and most folk know juniper because of these wee berries here, which of course flavour gin. But juniper has many uses. And although the berries are very tasty, especially later on in the year when they actually go purple, when they go purple they become as sweet as a raisin, and they still have a very strong flavour of gin. Also juniper, the bark of it is incredibly useful as a tinder for starting fires. Underneath the juniper tree itself we have a pretty interesting wee habitat where two different plants are growing. The first one is wood sorrel. There are two types of sorrel up where I live, and that's the wood sorrel, this one here, which loves the shade. It looks like a wee clover, and it tastes quite lemony, so it's a really good substitute for lemon. The other sorrel is called common sorrel, and I'll show you that very soon. It likes to grow in the open grassland. And next to the wood sorrel is a plant called wood bittercress, and it has sort of a cressy mustard flavour. It's a very tasty wee plant, really strong. Small, delicate leaves, but very powerful. So just two quite unique plants here, commonly found underneath the juniper tree just because they like the shade and shelter. The other incredibly useful thing about juniper is the actual bark of the juniper itself. And when you strip off layers of the bark from the dead branches and you buff it together in your hands, you end up with quite a fibrous material, which is really good for putting an ember into and blowing into a flame. That's the tinder which we'll use to start the fire later on. So here, in a bit more of an open area, an open land, and in a grassy sort of field, there's the other member of the sorrel family, which is common sorrel. And it's just beneath my feet here in this long grass. So this small leaf, quite delicate leaf, is common sorrel. Looks a bit like a rocket, and that has a really nice sort of sour lemon taste. And it's this plant here, along with the wild thyme, I'm going to stuff my fish with and cook over the fire. So just on the banking of this burn which is behind me is the wild thyme. It's this lovely little purpley flower, and it's the leaves that we're after. And these leaves have a really strong smell and flavour, and they'll go really nicely with the stuff the fish with the sorrel. So I have a piece of my chaga from earlier on, the mushroom which grows on the side of the birch tree, and I'll break off a corner of the chaga. I'll place it on the end of my piece of flint, and just with striking down with another material which is steel, you're striking, taking sparks off of the metal, and hopefully you get a spark landing on your chaga, on the mushroom, and it will begin to ignite and smoulder. And that there is going to go into our dried juniper bark. And I'll begin to blow it into a flame. Many of the plants that we consider as weeds were actually incredibly useful plants not that long ago, such as this one. This is called coltsfoot, also known as poor man's tobacco, as the leaves were traditionally gathered by crofters that couldn't afford tobacco, and they were hung and shredded and used as a substance, a tobacco substance. Or there's this plant here, known as soft rush or rash. And another common name for this plant is poor man's candles. It's been referred to poor man's candles in quite a lot of books on the plant. And that's because if you peel back the outer stem, the outer fibre, green outer fibre, and you expose the inner pith, you essentially are down to this sort of really quite foamy pith, which is incredibly absorbent. And this was traditionally rolled in fat, in sheep fat, and lit and was used as candles for those that couldn't afford wax in remoter parts of Scotland. A plant I can never not talk about is nettles. Many gardeners hate nettles as they feel it ruins their flower beds and consider it a weed. And it is essentially a weed, but it wasn't that long ago. Again, it was a very useful plant. During the First and Second World War, this plant was looked to for a lot of nutrition, and it's packed full of vitamin C, and in fact one of my most favourite soups is with nettles. It consists of several handfuls of nettles, one potato, salt, pepper and stock. It's a very simple, tasty soup. I really do like the nettle a lot for sure. it.